Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. And I am so glad to see so many people in the audience tonight. Looks like a lot of new friends and a lot of our old friends here tonight as well. So welcome to you all. I'm not going to talk too long. I'm just going to introduce you to some of Crowdcast's features and make a few more remarks before introducing our two amazing guests who I've had the pleasure of spending some time with this afternoon or this morning in our tech run and just now in the green room. And I assure you, you are in for a treat. So I will keep my remarks brief. First of all, I see that you've already discovered the chat. Keep it up, keep chatting away. That is one of the fun things about these virtual programs, is meeting new people, chatting away, and sharing your comments and insights in that forum. And it's something you can't do when you attend a live talk, can you? You're not supposed to sit there and chat while the speakers are speaking, but it's perfectly legit and encouraged here. So please keep it up. And there's one of our featured speaker tonight, Deborah, saying hello. Hi, Deborah. But we are going to have a Q&A session toward the end of our program tonight. And if you do have a question for either Deborah or Sophfronia, if you could be so kind as to place that question in the Ask a Question area at the bottom of your screen. There are already two questions there. That makes it a whole lot easier for me when I come back up and help with that part of the program toward the end. So please post your questions there. And you can look at what other people have posted and upvote those questions if you have the same one. So that's fun too. While I have your attention focused on that part of the screen, if you could just lift your eyeballs a little bit to look at the part that says your support is vital to the Mark Twain House and Museum, please donate here. I say this pretty much every virtual program that we've done. We've done about 150 of them since COVID began. Our first one was April 13th, 2020. And it has not been an easy ride for us. We've been really lucky in that we've been able to stay open. We've stayed connected with our audiences largely through programs such as tonight's, and we've attracted a lot of new friends from all over the world. But for all that time, not all that time, but for a lot of that time, we've been without our major revenue source, which is our guided house tour. And while we are back in business with that, I'm delighted to say people are coming in droves to tour the Mark Twain House and Museum. We have a little bit of catch-up ball to play. So why am I telling you all of this? Because we are a private nonprofit organization. We are not a federal or a state organization. And our revenue is earned for the most part. And we depend very heavily on the generosity of people such as yourselves to share with us whatever you're able. And we know not everybody is able. So please, if you're not, enjoy this program one way or another. But if you can spare anything, $5, $10, $50, anything, I just promise you on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the staff of the Mark Twain House that every single penny is deeply appreciated and put to very, very good use. So thank you in advance for whatever you're able to do to help us with that. Another way you can help us is to purchase a copy of tonight's book, Ladyparts. I'm halfway through. I just got it the other day and I can hardly put it down. It is so fascinating. Now, we know we're no dummies. You can buy this book elsewhere. But if you do make your purchase through the Mark Twain House and Museum, and there's a link in the chat that I'll repost so you can all see it when I'm finished speaking in a moment, know that you get a signed copy for one thing, and also know that your purchase does benefit the Mark Twain House and Museum, so you can feel good about that. So thank you for bearing with me while I made all those remarks. Oh, and Jacques has reposted that for me. Thank you so much, Jacques. We appreciate it. I'd like to, first of all, thank our sponsors for tonight's program. Tonight's program is sponsored by the Wish You Well Foundation and by our media sponsor, Connecticut Public WNPR. And it's produced in part with support honoring the legacy of Frank Lord, who was a longtime and beloved trustee of the museum, very dedicated to us, very good friend of ours, who sadly passed away last year. So we're very grateful for all that support from all three of those sources. Now I'd like to introduce our guests. Sophfronia Scott is a dear friend of the Mark Twain House and Museum. She's a wonderful writer. She's the director of the Alma College MFA in Creative Writing for the 21st Century program. I read that wrong. I'm going to give it another try because I broke it up in the wrong place. The Alma College MFA in Creative Writing for the 21st Century program, and the author of novels and works of nonfiction, including most recently The Seeker and the Monk, Everyday Conversations with Thomas Merton, about which she spoke for the Mark Twain House just back in May. So welcome back to Sophfronia. And Deborah Copaken is the New York Times bestselling author of several books, including Shutterbabe, The Red Book, and Between Here and April. A contributing writer at The Atlantic, she was also a TV writer on Emily in Paris, a performer, The Moth, and other places, and an Emmy Award-winning news producer and photojournalist. Her photographs have appeared in Time, Newsweek, and the New York Times. Her writing has appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Times, the Guardian, the Financial Times, Observer, the Wall Street Journal, The Nation, Slate, the Oprah magazine, and Paris Match, among others. Her column, When Cupid is a Prying Journalist, was adapted for the Modern Love streaming series, and she lives in Brooklyn with her family. So I'd love to have you join me in welcoming Sophfronia and Deborah to the screen. I'm going to call them up right now. Sophfronia. Welcome, Sophfronia. And here comes Deborah. And I'm sorry, I was saying my mouse is broken, so it's taking me a moment to get everybody all set. There we go. Welcome, Sophfronia and Deborah. It's so good to see you both.
Great to see you too. Yeah. Now,
So,
Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong. If I did not hear, you did not tell them that we already know each other, Deb and I, right?
Okay, I did not.
So we're going to talk about that. We'll start with that. So
yes, yeah. I didn't want to be a spoiler. I thought I'd say that for you. And I just want to direct your attention to Jacques' comment that we love Sophfronia Scott, and you should too. So,
thank you, Jacques.
So, I'm going to sit back and enjoy with everybody else, but Sophfronia, you'll call me back up toward the end and let me help with the Q&A?
Absolutely.
Great. Looking forward to it. Have fun.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Hey, Deb.
Hey, Sophfronia. How are you? Been a couple years now, right?
Yeah, since last reunion, I think. So,
yeah.
So I will let people know, and some of the people in the chat already know this. Deb and I know each other because we went to college together. We've known each other since we were 18. And I will say, I don't know if the feeling is mutual, but I've had a fascination with Deb since then. The reason
totally mutual
is because I found out sometime at the beginning of freshman year that she had been in a movie called Key Exchange. And she has like a cameo at the beginning of that movie. And me being, girl from Midwestern Ohio had never, conceived of meeting anyone who'd been in a movie. So I was just absolutely fascinated by that. And then just in general, your whole artistic milieu, that I just have been following you forever. And of course we were in Adam's house together. But I bring that up, Deb, because I just feel, and we're going to talk about some of this tonight, and I think it's important that we have other women who are heroes, who seem to be doing the thing that we want to do, to support each other, to cheer each other on, and just to say, wow, okay, I can do this too.
Thank you for saying that. And I think actually one of the reasons I wrote this book is to show that even when you are in public a hero, as you said, in private, there can be many, many struggles behind the scene. And I thought it was important to let others know that even when things look good on the outside, underneath there can be real problems and real issues, monetary issues, bodily issues, health issues, relational issues. And yeah, anyway, that was part of the impetus.
We talked about this. I remember at one of our reunions, we sat down and had a long talk about this. And you saying exactly that to me. And I remember thinking that it was wonderful that you were putting that out there. And that's why I was really glad when you wrote this book, because I felt it was brave. So many, it's that quiet struggle thing that I think too many women struggle quietly, and they need to know that other women are going through this too.
And I think that struggle for women is not just, women in the arts, but just women in general. If you are a woman with a body and you are seeing doctors for the pains within that body, you are a priori not given a fair shake. We saw this recently. I mean, I follow Amy Schumer on Instagram, right? And so she recently came out with the fact that she went through endometriosis and that nobody studies this. And she kept going to the doctors. And, like her, I also had an appendectomy. And I had no idea, and I don't know if if other people had any idea, that if you're a woman over 35 and you've given birth after the age of 35, your chances of having an appendectomy or appendicitis are 80% more than the general public. Like, somebody should have told me that, because then when I went into a doctor with severe pain in my left side, he said, "Oh, it's gas." And I said, "No, I know what gas is. I really think this is more." And I collapsed in his waiting room, and he literally stood over me with his legs on either side of me, and he said, "Oh, come on, it can't be that bad." And an hour later, I was getting an emergency appendectomy. So, being a woman with a body, we know very little about our bodies. When I bled out from vaginal cuff dehiscence, I had no idea what that was. I was not told that this is a possible complication from trachelectomy or hysterectomy. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent right now.
but not really, though, because the book, a big part of this book is about that. I mean, that's why it's called Ladyparts, because you're journeying through all of these different challenges that you've had with your physical being and looking at life through that lens. And I appreciate that, because again, so many women have experienced that, but also you bring to light the fact that there has been very little research done about the female body. Has that changed at all since this book has come out?
Well,
since you were writing it, I should say.
So I had cited a study from 2013, and I found a more recent study of just whether OBGYNs practicing today had any experience with menopausal medicine. And it was like only 6% of them had any formal training in menopausal medicine. And even today on our class Facebook group, there was a whole bunch of questions about hormone replacement therapy, which is now called menopausal hormone treatment. And the misinformation flying in our Harvard class of people, and some of the people on the thread are doctors. It's just, when I spoke to an OBGYN who eventually became my OBGYN, I said, what does it take to study menopausal medicine? She says, "I'm self-taught. I have to go to the conferences. I have to read all the studies. I am always trying to read up on the latest news, because we are not taught this in schools." And my daughter right now is in her first year of medical school, thinking of becoming an OBGYN. And I sort of said to her, if you can focus on menopausal women, I mean, that's an underserved community. It's a truly underserved community. I mean, it took a urologist in DC reaching out over Twitter to tell me that recurring UTIs in menopausal women, which I had them all the time, can be easily and safely treated with vaginal estrogen. I had no idea. It shouldn't have taken a urologist reaching out over Twitter to tell me this. And the minute I went on, I actually decided to go on systemic estrogen because I could. Yeah. And the minute I went on estrogen, my UTIs disappeared. And I had been on a prophylactic dose of nitrofurantoin forever, meaning I was taking an antibiotic every time I would have any sexual activity, just to make sure that I didn't get that UTI, and I would get them anyway. So why don't we know these things? We don't know these things because we're not studied, because the doctors don't know these things, because women's bodies are the secondary body. The male body is the main body. If you're getting a knee replacement, you're getting a male knee. If you're getting a hip replacement, you're getting a male hip. Desks. My desk is built for a man. So my chair has to be raised up so that I can't put my feet on the floor. So then I have this dumb thing to
Yeah.
put my feet on, because my desk is not made for a woman either. Anyway, I could go on and on and on and on.
I don't know what's scarier, the fact that it's not studied, or the fact that they treat it and haven't studied it. So it's like, oh, what are they doing? Like just throwing spaghetti against the wall, seeing if it sticks?
I mean, I had something, my health journey began with something called adenomyosis, which is sort of the cousin of endometriosis. And oh God, there's a moth. Sorry. So
Virginia Woolf of you.
Yeah, I know. Adenomyosis, I had never heard the term. When I would go for my yearly checkups, my gynecologist would say, so how are your periods? And I would say, heavy, because, fine, heavy. Like we don't know what's normal and what's not normal. Nobody tells us. Like, so it was only after I started using a Diva cup, which is like a little, for those who don't know, for the men on the screen here, it's a little cup that looks like a diaphragm with a pointy tip, and you use it instead of a tampon, and you can actually measure the amount of blood that you're producing, because each Diva cup is an ounce. Now, one female period over the course of a week is supposed to be 1 ounce of blood the whole time. So, that's what you're supposed to produce. I was producing 1 ounce of blood every 30 minutes. And at night I was soaking through bed sheets. But I didn't know that was unusual, because nobody talks about it. So it took my general practitioner taking my blood and seeing that my hemoglobin level was a 7. I mean, that's basically barely alive. Normal hemoglobin for women is 12, 13. I mean, you have to be above that to be standing. And when he saw the 7, he had them retest. He goes, well, this can't be right. And then when he retested, it came back as 7. He said, well, how are you standing? And I said, I've been so tired. But nobody asks us those questions. And we don't even know what is normal exhaustion and what is run-of-the-mill exhaustion, because we're working mothers, and government's not giving us anything. So we're working ourselves to the bone because we have to pay for our childcare. And I go into the whole notion of, had I stayed in France, for example, my childcare would not be as expensive as it was, because they have a creche system. The minute that child is 6 months old, a year old, they go into the creche. The creche costs a certain amount of percentage of your income. Now, a friend of mine, for example, Marion, was a editor at Paris Match, and she had a good salary. And even with her good salary, she was paying 25 euros a week for the creche, which is about $32 a week.
Wow.
A week, not a day, not an hour. I mean, we're paying $25 an hour for childcare these days.
Yeah.
It's a college tuition.
Yes. And way before.
And then there's college tuition on top. I was paying childcare and 2 college tuitions at one point. It was like, earning at one point $160,000 a year and unable to afford my life because whatever. Anyway. Crazy.
Well, Deb, but you mentioned exhaustion and just that, keeping up with tuition and all of this. So we had mentioned earlier today the hamster wheel, right? And you recently came back from a trip, and you said that you had gotten off the hamster wheel. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, because you're on a hamster wheel in this book.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like you're still on it. Like this is the way most people live. So what is that for you, this hamster wheel?
At one point in 2019, I had 4 jobs. I was writing this book, and I would get up at 4:30, that period of time in LA, to write this book. I would write from about 4:30 or 5 until 9. Then I would walk to my job at Emily in Paris, which was a writer's room that would go until 4. Then I would walk back, and I would walk on either end. I didn't have a car in LA because I needed that exercise. So I deliberately didn't get myself a car. I also couldn't afford it. And I would walk back to my Airbnb, start my other job, which was as a writer for a company called NeuroTrack. And I would do that writing from like 4:30, 5 o'clock until I dropped, and would order in dinner and eat as I was doing that, and then wake up at 4 and start all over again. I just got back yesterday from essentially 3 weeks away. So my partner of 4 years and I broke up, and it was just a traumatic experience because I didn't know a lot of information that suddenly became available to me in July. And I just thought, I have to get away. I had a free ticket because I was supposed to go away with him and his family to Wyoming. And so suddenly I had a free ticket because I wasn't going to go away with them. And my friend Ayelet had a free house in Greece. And it was only because I had the free ticket and the free house that I could afford. And it was in a tiny island in Greece where the food was fairly inexpensive. You could get a Greek salad for €4, that I could afford to take a 3-week vacation. Otherwise, I would never be able to take a 3-week vacation. But during that 3-week vacation in that free house with my free ticket, it was the first time. I mean, I'm trying to think back. When have I ever had a 3-week vacation? Never. It was the first time in my life. It was the first time in my life that I had 3 weeks off since summer camp as a kid. And, other countries, Italy, France, they take 6 weeks off in the summer. I mean, they all do. It's like they take a 6-week vacation. And the fact that we don't do that in the United States, that, most jobs, when you start off, you get 2 weeks. And a lot of those 2 weeks are taken up with chores and things that you have to get done, right? We need to start stressing the importance of rest, because a lot of my ailments that I discuss in the book were stress related. The tachycardia and I think the PVCs of my heart, there was no reason for my heart to be doing this sort of what I call my beat skipping thing. There's no reason for this other than stress. There's also great evidence at this point that stress causes cancer. I was diagnosed with stage 0 breast cancer. My dad died of pancreatic cancer, but other than that, there's no BRCA gene. I don't have a BRCA gene. There's no breast cancer in my family. There was no genetic reason that I should come down with stage 0 breast cancer. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe it was stress related. And we have to start talking about the effects of stress on the female body, or on the human body, but particularly on the female body, because as we saw during the pandemic, there was that great headline, 120,000 jobs were lost. All of them were women in December of 2020. 120,000 jobs were lost. All of them were women across the New York Times, CNN, Washington Post. What kind of world are we living in? It's not okay.
Yeah. And we're holding up the world, but then there's no support for us in doing so.
And you only realize that becoming a solo mother. And I say solo mother as opposed to single mother because when I became a solo mother, my ex-husband had moved across the country. So for 4 years, it was all on me, monetarily, physically, earning everything was on me, and I couldn't even date really. And we also know that sex is an incredibly healthy experience. Being able to have sexual relations with others is good for our bodies. And we need to start talking about that too. So here I was, a solo mother, unable to date, taking care of everybody, 2 kids in college, 1 tiny one at home, and, having to shuttle them back and forth to school and do my jobs. And, I started taking corporate jobs to have health insurance, because in this country, we don't have health insurance. And so as a solo mother, before I was getting my health insurance through my ex-husband's job, but suddenly I had to quit writing until I realized I could actually write in the mornings, but I had to quit writing and start working at these corporate jobs. And I worked at a health magazine, which shall remain unnamed. And after 3 months, when I got diagnosed with breast cancer there, I got fired for absenteeism. My absences, all 9 of them, were breast cancer related. I got fired for getting breast cancer at a health magazine. You know,
Unbelievable.
I don't even know what else to say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me, Deb, as a writer, right? I know people must say to you, "Oh, how can you write about that? How can you write about that? Isn't that TMI, or shouldn't you keep that to yourself?" How do you respond to something like that?
The secrets we are keeping are killing us. The secrets we are keeping are killing us. I nearly died from vaginal cuff dehiscence, which was I had a trachelectomy, and 3 weeks later, these giant blood clots started coming out of me, shooting out of me, like literally shooting out like a gun, and and then what does the New York Times review go ahead and say? They are like, well, it's a little bit too gross. I mean, we need to start talking about female associated viscera. And I say female associated for our trans friends, but we need to start talking about what we bleed, how we bleed, when we bleed, why we bleed, the effects of that blood. We bleed. And it happens every month until you hit menopause. And then we don't know anything about menopause. And this is killing us. This is killing us. Misinformation is killing us. Lack of information is killing us. I nearly died. I didn't. Thank God my daughter was home that night and got me to the hospital. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that she now wants to become an OBGYN. I mean, we need to start talking about these things and not punish people for talking about them, and not say, ooh, TMI, ooh, gross. No, it's what happens. It's us. It's our bodies.
Yeah. And we can't be afraid of that.
Mm-mm.
Because if we can't talk about it, how are you supposed to even tell your doctor this is what's going on?
Yes, and if we can't talk about the fact that, as a writer, anybody in the arts who needs health insurance has to get a corporate job. Like, I could do so much better at my job as writer if I could just have health insurance, right? And didn't have to find a corporate job to get that health insurance. Imagine the books we could have. I mean, people talk about Harry Potter and about J.K. Rowling and how she was, wrote the first part of Harry Potter on a napkin. She had the NHS and unemployment, right? So if you have, it's not a lot, but knowing that you have free health care and a little bit of money to get you by is a tiny cushion, which those of us who are writers don't have. And so what are we getting? We're getting a lot of books from rich people. We're getting a lot of books from women married to men who are rich. We're getting a lot of books from men who are married to women who are rich. To write a book, to create a book.
I've never thought of that. Wow.
We're getting a lot of rich people books,
Yeah.
And look by the way, who's making the decisions in the publishing houses? Who can afford to get $34,000 a year as a starting salary? Or it was even less when it was $16,000 at one point. But the people that can afford to get $34,000 a year as a starting salary at a publishing house are those whose parents are helping them out, or they have generational wealth. I mean, and we see this in the Black community, right? The Black community is hindered by a lack of generational wealth. They're hindered by the fact that their grandparents and parents could not get a mortgage. And that affects their choices and their chances and their ability to produce something important and special later in their lives. I could go on and on and on. I feel like I'm standing on a little bit of a high horse right now and need to bring it down.
Okay. All right. Then this is a good place then to bring in Nora.
Yeah.
Right. So I love the portions in the book where Nora Ephron shows up, who is a dear friend of yours. Talk a little bit about Nora, but also about what she meant to you as an older female friend.
So right off the bat, I'm going to say, if you're an older woman who has the opportunity to mentor a younger woman, do it. Make sure you do it. do it whenever you can. Answer those emails from the young people calling you from your college. But Nora Ephron reached out to me out of the blue to my home phone number after she read Shutterbabe, my first memoir. And she called on the phone. She's like, hello. I said, hi, this is Nora Ephron. And I was like, yeah, right. Hi, Meg.
Right.
I thought it was my friend Meg, who was a really good mimic, but it was Nora. And she chastised me for not being listed at 411. You could, by the way, you could find Nora Ephron by dialing 411 back in the day. So she chastised me for not being listed. She said, why would you ever not be listed? What if somebody needs to get in touch with you?
To tell you won an Oscar.
Or whatever, or give you a job. Why are you not listed? Anyway, she wanted to take me out to lunch, and that was in 2001. And those lunches became a monthly fixture in my life until she died in 2012. And it was Nora actually who, when I told her that I had adenomyosis and that my doctor, my OBGYN said my uterus needed to come out, and I was just pushing it off. She's like, what are you holding on to it? The only thing a uterus is good for after a certain point is causing pain and killing you. So I was like, oh, but won't I feel like less of a woman without a uterus? She goes, what? Get the thing out. What? So for about a year of lunches, she was like, you got to get it out. Have you gotten it out? Did you make the appointment? I want you to make the appointment. And I finally made the appointment. And I emailed her from the next day at the room that you're in the hospital room. I emailed her from the hospital room. I was like, you'll be very proud of me. I scheduled my hysterectomy. I just got it out. Can't wait to see you. It's going to take a little while to recuperate. Why don't we make a lunch date for 7 weeks from now? And she didn't write back, which was very unusual. She was a very fast texter and a very fast emailer back. You would get it immediately. I don't know how she produced all the work she produced and was emailing with all of her mentees, because I wasn't the only mentee I found out at her funeral. There were like 7 of us. Anyway, so she didn't email me back. And then I emailed her again, and she didn't email me back, and I grew concerned. And then my friend called me up, one of her mentees, and said, did you hear that Nora's in the hospital? And I was like, what? What? No. And then she died the next day. So while I was getting my uterus out, Nora was doing the hard work of dying. And irony of irony, my daughter got her period for the first time. So literally the hour that I got my uterus out, my female mentor was dying, and my daughter was getting her period, which is kind of the impetus for this book. When I realized that each body part had a metaphoric element, each of them, like my heart went on the fritz right as I was starting to date again. So I was like wearing, this heart monitor as I was going on Tinder dates, so it really sparked the idea for this book. But going back to the whole mentor thing, Nora was there for me all the time. She was there. So if I was writing an essay and I was sort of working through it and couldn't figure out where I was missing something, she would read and be like, 3rd paragraph, add this, and you'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. Or if I just, when my marriage broke up, she's the first person I called. She's the first person that I felt comfortable confiding the secrets of my marriage, because I didn't want to tell my friends, because they were friends with my ex-husband. I didn't want to introduce that element into our friend group. Having a mentor who's sort of a little bit outside of the friend group was very useful. And I called her crying one morning. I mean, really the day that my marriage ended, it had been a horrible evening the night before. I called her at 6 o'clock the next morning. She said, I've already booked you onto the jitney. Get on the jitney. You're going to come to my house in the Hamptons. I'm going to make you lunch. We'll talk. And, I just went out to her house. She made me lunch. I cried 1,000 tears. And then I went home and did the hard work of starting to work towards a divorce, and it was her kind embrace and her acceptance of all things. And also I knew that she'd gone through 2 divorces herself, right? I knew that
Right.
she'd had an early marriage that ended. She had her marriage to Carl Bernstein that ended with infidelity. In fact, after I found out about my partner's various lies, I spent the entire trip back from Greece on, it is an 11-hour flight from Athens to New York yesterday, listening to Meryl Streep do the audiobook of Heartburn, which is Nora's first and only novel. And it's really a roman à clef about her, the breakup of her marriage to Carl Bernstein. And hearing her voice in my ear, because really Meryl Streep inhabits Nora's voice. I recommend it to everyone. It's a really, it's a funny book. It's a beautiful book. And hearing Meryl Streep do Nora's voice, it was really as if this voice had come back from the dead to tell me what to do next, to explain to me how to process. Whoops, my headphone came out. To explain to me how to process this new trauma,
Yeah. I find that the value to me of older women friends is that they give me a sense of it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Right. That no matter what happens, it's going to be all right. And it sounds
Totally.
like she did that for you. And honestly, Deb, I think a lot of women will get that sense from your book that a lot of stuff will happen, but you're gonna make it through somehow.
Well, thank you very much. I have gotten from this book more than any other book, hundreds of emails at this point. I mean, I have on my website, I have a place for people to be able to contact me, and it just goes. There's nobody doing my social media or my stuff. It goes straight to me, and hundreds of letters from women saying, I've been going through the same thing. Or today I got one saying, I also had a hysterectomy. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a domestic abuse survivor. I'm a divorce survivor. And I have $75 in my bank account right now. And thank you for making me feel seen. And that's what Nora did for me. She made me feel seen. And yes, it was important to feel seen, but also I think the importance of a mentor is not only to support, but to push back when pushing back is necessary. Because there were times when we'd be at lunch and I'd be like, well, and I did blah, 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 because blah, blah, blah. And she'd be like, no, you didn't. Like a good shrink. No, you didn't. You did it because that, or you did it because that. And somebody who knows you well enough and has enough experience as a woman in the world to be able to call you on your, are we allowed to curse? Call you on your bullshit, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly the other job of a mentor, calling you on your bullshit. Yeah. We all have it.
Now, when you mentioned the letters, that made me think of something else. I teach writing, right? And I direct the writing program. And one of the things, the question that always comes up when we talk about writing memoir is there are people who say, well, nobody's going to care about that. I mean, it's just my story. Nobody's going to care. And I tell them, and I found this in my own personal writing, that if you tell your own story and you tell it true enough, it will strike a chord, and that chord resonates, and the reader will begin to read themselves into your story. And they're not reading about you anymore. They're reading about themselves. And that's when you get those letters. And to me, that's what the best memoir, the best creative nonfiction is all about. And you did that.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that, but I also would like to call out. So, for example, when you say that, I think about Mary Karr's Liars Club, right?
Yeah.
I think about Cheryl Strayed, Wild. I mean, I never went hiking through the Pacific Northwest, but the truths that she revealed spoke to me.
Yeah. It's universal. They make it universal.
Angela's Ashes, right? I'm not an Irish guy that grew up, freezing cold in Ireland and immigrated to the United States, but his truths about the immigrant experience in America. I mean, my family came over in the 1900s, felt very true to me and felt very much like, okay, this is what it means to be an immigrant. This is what America means, right? This is what it's given us. I love memoir. I will read, like, Lauren Huff wrote a memoir. I can't remember the name of it. I just read it this summer. And it was about basically being a cable guy and also being homeless and living out of her car. And she's a wonderful Twitter presence as well. She's funny. And it's almost like you become friends with these people, right? You learn so. If a memoir is true, if it's written from the heart, if you just kind of pull this thing out and just throw it on the page, then we are going to react in a way that allows us to see our own humanity. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, but you've also done some work to think about your truths, right? So, and that's another key I feel, is that you don't just throw what happened to you on the page, that you've done some reflection and you say, okay, this is what I think about this, and this is how I've walked my way through it. And I make that delineation because I used to think I didn't like memoir, and it just turned out I was reading stuff that was like that, where people are just kind of putting out their traumatic experience with no process, and it felt traumatic to me, and
Yeah.
I didn't get to see any truth in it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I think that humor is really important in processing trauma. I mean, not every memoir that I love has humor in it, but the ones that do sing to me particularly, because again, let's go back to Nora. Nora said, when you fall on a banana peel, people laugh at you. Or when you slip on a banana peel, people laugh at you. When you tell the story of slipping on the banana peel, it's your laugh. So it's about framing the story, and framing is really important. So for anyone out there writing a memoir right now, you have got to think of your structure. And without structure, you don't have a memoir. You have to think of it in high, lofty Aristotelian terms. What's your arc? You know, it's a hero's journey, right? What is your hero's journey? What is your anti-hero's journey? Who are you? Are you the hero? Are you the anti-hero? How are you going to make it to the end, to that third act? And you know, until I figured out the whole body part structure, this memoir was all over the place. I tried to sell it, by the way, twice under two different ideas. One of them was about improv. So I'd written a memoir that I called Yes And, about using improv to say yes and to your life, but like it didn't work with this story. And then I tried to sell it under a different title, which was much more about the marriage and not about the other body issues. And again, it was just like a memoir of divorce that didn't have an underpinning. It was just, relationship broke up. Once I hit upon the body parts and how each body part stood as a metaphor for everything else going on, that's when I could write the story. Same with Shutterbabe, you know, and Shutterbabe and Ladyparts are very much, I think, bookends. And until I hit on the idea that I was going to name each chapter after a man slightly off screen. So each chapter is really a war that I was in, like Afghanistan, Romania, you know, various stories. But when I named it after the man, I realized, okay, I am now turning the male gaze on its head. This is the female gaze. I'm going to look at men. I'm going to talk about female sexual agency. I'm going to talk about a woman alone out in the world through the lens of her relationship to a man or non-relationship to a man. That was when I finally was able to tell that story. And sometimes it takes years to find that structure.
Yeah.
Years.
But you're right, it's all about the structure. And if anybody out there teaches creative writing, I highly recommend you study this book, because I was fascinated, because a lot happens in this book. And that made me, like, I wanted to go with a fine-tooth comb. Okay, how did she do this? And looking at your chapters and yes, the connection to the body parts, but it's even deeper than that. Like you said, all of these different thoughts come into play about where you are in this story and what exactly is happening. It's absolutely a masterful piece of structure work.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Like, yeah, for example, like, where does the whole Trump thing fit in? You know, like, I was sexually harassed out of this job, and it worked really well in the place that it fell, you know, by accident. Thank God, because it had happened during that period of you know, in the cervix. Anyway.
Yeah.
A lot happens to women, not just to me. A lot happens. And we were talking a little bit about this before we all came on the Crowdcast, which is you were saying that, or we were saying that a lot happens in this book and a lot happened in my life. But yes, a lot happened in a very protracted period of time, but it's not any different than what happens to women over the course of our lifetime. We are traumatized again and again and again. I remember my first female trauma, and I didn't even write about this in this book. I don't think I wrote about it. Maybe in passing, but I was in Mexico with my ballet class. No, I didn't write about this. That was cut out. I was in Mexico with my ballet class, and I was 12, and I was wearing a sundress, and I had just the tiniest beginning of boobs, right? Just the tiniest beginning of boobs. And my friend Stacy and I got left behind in the bathroom of a pizza place, and all of our class got on the bus and went to the Teatro de la Ciudad, where we were performing that night, and we were left alone. And we got out of the pizza restaurant, and we were like, "Oh no, we don't speak Spanish, and where are we?" So we walked out into the street, and we were crying, and we were 12 in our little sundresses and our tiny little boobs, and I said, "Oh, there's a policeman. Let's go ask the policeman." And we walked up to the policeman and we said, and I knew a tiny bit of Spanish. I said, "Donde está el Teatro de la Ciudad?" And he grabbed my breast, my tiny little breast, the policeman. And it was the first time that I was like, oh, there's no protection. There's no protection if you're a woman. And thank God there was an American couple that just happened to pass by and heard us struggling to speak Spanish. They're like, "Are you guys lost? What's going on?" And we just started crying harder. And we told them what was going on. They got us, and we had no money. So they got us in a cab, paid for the cab. Anyway, our ballet teacher yelled at us for staying behind in the bathroom. We're like, "We were peeing."
Yeah. Which women tend to do,
Yeah.
It may take us longer. I don't know. Anyway, thank you, Deb. I'm going to ask Jennifer to come back in so that we can do the Q&A, because we can keep talking like this all night.
Yeah, sure. Hey,
Jennifer,
how are you?
Can we just keep this going for another couple hours? Every single thing you said, I'm like, yes. And I have so many kind of personal connections that I probably won't share here, but I do want you to know that I think I join the rest of the audience in just being so grateful for this opportunity to spend the evening with the two of you for such a thoughtful and provocative conversation. And I am going to, we don't actually have any questions yet from the audience. Come on, audience. I know that you've been riveted, but now take a moment, if you will, and think of a question. I'm sure you have many, but I'd like to ask, how much, well, I'm going to tell you a little background first, which is that I had a health situation very similar to yours, one of the ones that you described, Deb, last year or the year before. And when I was on medical leave, the first book that I read was all of Nora Ephron. I needed to be comforted by her words and by her presence, and how interesting. I mean, in that way, she was like a mentor to me through that. So, but I'd like to ask you, how conscious are you as a mother of a daughter? And I had shared with you that I have a daughter who's about to have a daughter of her own.
Yeah.
Thinking not just of these, fighting these battles on your own behalf, but the legacy and the future of women in this country. And how much did you have that in mind while you've not just written this book, but everything that you've done to address these issues?
So I dedicated the book to Sasha, and if you'll notice, it says "to Sasha again," because I dedicated Shutterbabe to her, figuring 20 years ago when that book came out that we would fix these things 2 decades hence. Oh, but no, it's just gotten worse. I mean, income inequality has gotten worse. Babysitters are more expensive. Like, everything has gotten worse, not better. And I even said to Sasha recently, I said, look, she has a boyfriend, maybe they'll get married, I don't know, but like, she will probably have kids soon. And I said to her, I think I'm going to have to be your nanny, because I don't know how you're going to afford a nanny. So like, just call on me. I'll figure out my writing situation, but I would like to be on call to be the babysitter for your children, because you can't be a doctor and have kids, and you can't have kids after a certain age, because then it's like more dangerous to have the children. So
Yeah.
Count on me. I hope I stay alive for that long.
Wow. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
So now we do have a couple questions. Rafia Zakaria has been very engaged in the chat, and she has kind of a two-part question. I think she wanted to clarify the first part. She says, how do you handle having gone through so much and not be bitter? I'm especially asking about your experiences in publishing and how it's rich people creating the narrative. Good question. Thank you.
Well, I mean, here I am smiling on a Zoom or whatever we're calling this thing. I cry. I have really, really hard moments. But I think you have to become Buddhist about it all. Utter non-attachment to anything. And so, you get excited and attached to the idea of being a writer. You get excited and attached to the idea of selling. I tried to sell this book 2 other times. Let's remember that. And you just keep hitting your head against the wall. And one day you might break through it. And you might not. And that's okay too. Because I think that we reward in our society success. But if we reframe success as you keep trying, and even if you reach the end of your life and don't reach those goals that you want to reach, the fact that you tried is having reached the goal. And I believe that. I truly believe that. There are things I've wanted to do that I've not been able to do. And it's like, I tried. And if we can show up every day and do our best and try, and at the end of the day, if we can look back over the day and say, I did my best today. Non-attachment has been very useful. Like, I just had a traumatic breakup of a relationship that I thought was going to take me to old age. I mean, I had no idea there was anything wrong in the relationship. I just was blind. I was blind, and I'm stupid too. But it has taken me, I'm age 55, to be able to say, okay, non-attachment. We had 4 beautiful years. They were beautiful. The fact that it broke up the way it did does not take away in any way from the beauty of those years. And I'm going to move forward and download Hinge and download Tinder and just keep moving forward. And maybe I'll meet someone and maybe I won't. And either way is okay. So it's about feeling okay in your skin. It's about self-acceptance. It's about saying, yeah, I nearly died. Yeah, the healthcare system is bullshit. Yeah, I lost my job. Yeah, I lost another job. Corporate life is not for me, whatever. And just accepting all of the trauma as part of life. And, I also believe, because I'm a writer, that the writing has gotten me through. That writing my way through trauma, and Sophfronia, we were talking about this today, like writing your way through trauma, whether you're a writer or not, is the way to place it literally on a shelf, right? You take your trauma, you box it up, and you put it on a shelf, and it's there, and you can refer to it from time to time, and you can but it's not causing you daily harm. It's not causing you daily stress. I wrote a piece for The Atlantic about getting in touch with my rapist. I was raped on the last night of our college. And during the Kavanaugh hearings, I just was so re-traumatized, as every woman who'd ever been raped was re-traumatized. And I got in touch with my rapist. I wrote him an email. And he wrote back, or he called back within 20 minutes, unbelievably apologetic. He was really drunk that night. He had passed out in my bed. He said, I was a drunk. I went through AA. I don't remember anything from that night. I do remember meeting you vaguely, but I don't remember what happened. I'm really sorry. And he just went on and on and on and on, apologizing for this massive trauma that I've been carrying on my back for 30 years. And it was gone. It was gone because we talked through it, which is the same thing as writing through it. You have to deal with each trauma as it comes along and process it. And whether the processing is, some people write poetry, some people might write music, but art has always been our way of processing trauma. So find your art, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I like the word you used when we spoke about that earlier, Deb, was agency.
Yeah.
You said it gives you agency over the trauma.
Yeah, because once you're in charge of your own story, you have agency over it. If the story happened to you and you can't tell it and you don't know why, and you're still living in that sort of nowhere zone, you're going to keep being re-traumatized. I also am a firm believer in therapy, even though it's ridiculously expensive in this country. But there are inexpensive options if you like go to psychoanalytic institute and go with somebody who's being in training. Then you're getting a sliding scale. Sometimes it's even $5 a session, whatever it is. But like, I highly recommend therapy for real trauma that is hard to get through.
Goodness, have we covered a lot of ground this evening and explored so many issues. I'm going to. So I want everybody in the audience to know that all of our crowdcasts are recorded, and you can come back and watch this again and again just by following the same link you used. I bring that up by way of saying I can't wait to rewatch this and reabsorb things that I haven't fully absorbed yet. So thank you. So I'm going to finish up with one more question for each of you,
Sure.
and this is something that came from the audience. What are you writing? What's next? And Sophfronia, I think you can talk about that, and Deb, I hope you can too.
Sure.
Okay, I just finished a novel. I just finished it this past Saturday, and it's a historical fiction, and it takes place. It's Civil War America, so I will just say that a mixed race woman making her way in the world.
Awesome.
Sounds awesome.
I am working on a few things right now. One is I sold Ladyparts to CBS Productions, so I'm trying to figure out the structure for the book as TV, or whether it would be better served, as a series or as a limited series or as a film. So that's what I'm working on right now, and it's not clear at this moment for me what that's going to be. And I spent a lot of time when I was in Greece trying to write my way through it. And I wrote a pilot and I didn't like it. So again, a lot of writing is rewriting, right? You write something, it sucks, you throw it out, you start again. So that's where I am right now on that. I started a new novel while I was in Greece as well, which I'm not going to talk about because at the beginning of something, you jinx it if you talk about it, but I'm really psyched for where it's going. We'll see what happens. And then with The Atlantic, I'm going to be starting to write newsletters for them. And we're still working out the details of that, but I started a Substack, which is a newsletter, and I've written a couple of them, and I think what I'm going to do is transfer it over and work for The Atlantic on that.
Wow. Well, that's a lot to look forward to on both fronts from both of you wonderful writers. So thanks for sharing that with us. So I'm going to say that, well, Sophfronia, you're already a member of this circle. I always say the Mark Twain House is a writer's home and a home for writers. And Sophfronia is very much a member of our circle of writers. Deb, I hope that you will now feel like you're part of that circle as well.
I do. Thank you.
And I hope you'll come visit us when it's safe to do so. We've talked about maybe the two of you coming together, and I'll give you a tour of the Mark Twain House. And and I'll throw this in too. If you do come, I will give you a Mark Twain bobblehead doll. So if that's not incentive enough, I don't know what is. So audience, if you were not inclined to purchase this book before this conversation, I cannot imagine that you're not inclined to do so after hearing Deb and Sophfronia talk just now. The link is back there. Maybe, Jacques, if you're there, you can repost it for us. And remember that your order does support the Twain House, and you do get a signed copy. And thank you both so much. This has just been a delightful evening. I knew it was going to be.
Can I ask you a question? I want to be able to donate, but if I click on the donate, will I leave the crowdcast or will it open a new window?
It will. You can do that. So you can come back to the recording. Thank you for that. First of all, that's very generous of you to want to do that. I don't know. Try it right now. See what happens. No,
Okay,
no,
wait,
no.
yeah.
I'm afraid that might reveal
Yeah.
some of your financial stuff
Yeah.
or something. So what's going to happen, Deb, is as soon as we finish, like within 5 or 10 minutes, the recording will be available. And if you just come back to the link
Okay,
that
cool.
it came, and then you'll be able to do that there.
Okay,
so,
good. Okay, great. Yeah.
And that goes for all of you out in the audience too. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your generosity. And Jacques, thank you for reposting the link for purchasing the book.
Yeah.
And thank you to our audience for your great chats and your great questions. And let's do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thank you, Jennifer.
everybody.
Thank you.
Hi, Jenny. Hi, Jenny. Hi, Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny Lynn. Yeah, Jenny Lynn was there. I was like, yes.
I want to meet
Hi,
Jenny Lynn.
Paula.
She seems very important. So
Another cool Harvard girl.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Oh, everybody's checking it. Well, but
Oh my God,
another thing you should know.
We have so many people from our class here. Hi, class of '88. Nice to see
Well,
you all.
let me tell you another thing.
Liz is there. Yeah.
The recording is recorded, but the chat stays live. So if you have friends who are chiming in here, you can come back in afterward and continue to chat with them. And that keeps on going in perpetuity. So
Awesome.
do that. Yay, I feel like we organized a class reunion here on top of everything else. Right?
Reunion, yay.
Thank you both so much. And
Thank you.
See you soon. Thanks, everybody. Good night.